Hello, welcome to the episode on the Let Fuel Prosper series. My name is Dr. Vance Ginn. I hope you're having a prosperous day. Well, today we have someone who knows a lot about small businesses, what drives them, what keeps them wanting to hire, and none other than Texas, where so many businesses are moving. And it's none other than Annie Spilman. Annie, welcome to the Let Fuel Prosper show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk today.
Awesome. Well, it's really a pleasure to have you on, and we have a lot to talk about. So let me go ahead and start off with your bio, and then we'll get right into it. So Annie Spilman became Texas State Director of the National Federation of Independent Businesses of Texas in August 2018. She previously served as State Legislative Director representing NFIB in the Texas State Capitol on important issues such as tax reform and regulatory relief. As State Director, Spilman will be, is NFIB's primary advocate in the legislature and will guide and direct member engagement and political involvement throughout the state. A graduate of Southwest Texas State University, Spilman joined NFIB in 2014 after working as governmental affairs manager for the Independent Insurance Agents of Texas. Prior to that, she was a legislative consultant with Steve Bresnan and Associates in Austin. Spilman was chief clerk for the Texas House and Human Services Committee and was a legislative aide to several House members. So great background. You've been doing this for a while now, Annie, and just bringing a lot of wealth of knowledge and a lot of insights. Before we get started with some of those other things on policy in Texas, what drives you to do what you do each and every day?
I was going to say, that this is my 23rd year sort of in the business, and I'm excited to have been with NFIB for 9 years. And it's definitely, it's a labor of love, really. I mean, I was raised by small business owners, and let me tell you, it was, they ran a newspaper, and they were the publisher and the editor and the photographer and the reporter and I grew up in the business, literally stuffing inserts into the newspaper. It was just a family business, and we were all in it together. And there's not a lot of money in journalism, and there's not a lot of money in being a small business owner. And so, I learned at an early age that you have work ethic, you work hard, and you may not get the monetary value back, but you get that intrinsic value and the value of, being a part of your community. That's really what drives me. I've always said that, if I could, I would do this job for free. I obviously cannot do that. Living in Austin, Texas is not very cheap, but I mean, that's really what drives me. Our members are really, truly salt of the earth people. And NFIB, we represent such a broad spectrum of small business owners, really from, manufacturing, construction, wholesale, services industry, agriculture. I mean, small business owners, you just name it. They are members of NFIB, and it's so wonderful to talk to our members on a daily basis. And to hear their struggles, but to hear their victors, and then to know that they know that we've got their back, because a lot of times they feel like folks don't have their back, and they feel like kind of the government's out to get them on occasion,
Yeah, definitely. And one of the great things about you, Annie, too, is you have that happy warrior attitude. Now, you know how to get in with those people and make sure that things happen at the end of the day, but you do have that happy warrior attitude, which I really admire very much within this business. How many members are a part of NFIB Texas?
Right. So in Texas, the interesting thing about NFIB, although, we are a national organization, we do have an NFIB at every single one of our state capitals. And so in Texas, we've got over 22,000 small business owner members. And then nationally, you're looking at around 300,000. But Texas is our very number one state for NFIB membership. And so, Texas, we like to be the biggest and the baddest. And so, we've got the most members here in Texas. Now, granted, Texas is home to a little over 3 million small businesses. We would love for all of them to be NFIB members. That's not the case. They benefit from our advocacy, but hey, we're growing. We've been around for 80 years. And so we are an established organization. And yes, this is our 80th birthday this year. And I know I look
wow.
very young. And you look young.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. It's a great group overall, and people should check it out. I'll put it in the show notes page, your link and everything else. And, one of the things of doing business in Texas is it's a great place compared to many other places. I mean, it's why so many people are moving here, first of all, but also businesses are moving here. Highly educated workforce. You've got plenty of land. There's a lot of places that are still pretty affordable. Maybe not Austin. We could talk about some of that, but there are a lot of places that are still affordable in Texas. And when I was looking at the data, which I always do, and I know you do too, Texas has, when you look at non-farm employment, it's up for 17 straight months, record numbers, 17 straight months. When you look at since February of 2020, right before all the shutdowns and the pandemic and everything else, I was just doing the numbers earlier. Texas has created 30% of all new jobs created across the nation have just been in Texas, 30%, where the state only has 20% of the people, or even less than that. It's about 10% of the people, I should say. So 10% of the population of the nation, but 30% of the jobs. If you just looked at Texas and Florida, 50% of the jobs have been created in those two states when you only have about 20% of the population. But Texas is really driving the way. 21 consecutive years of export, being the number one in the nation. And a lot of this, of course, is driven by those small businesses. What do you hear from the small businesses in Texas about why they're coming to Texas? Why they live doing business in Texas?
Right. Well, I mean, let's face it. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure it out, but we let our businesses prosper, right? The government takes their foot off of their necks. They trust that these business owners, they know how to run their business. We've got, regulations in place just as any state does, and we've got our federal regulations, but they know that the more that you put mandates on a small business, costs on a small business, compliance on a small business, the less that they're going to be able to operate, to employ people, and to expand their business. And guess what? That's going to hurt the economy because 99.8% of all businesses in this state are small businesses. And, I'll tell you another thing, when we've polled our members, because that's one thing that NFIB does, we're a grassroots run member-based organization, and we like to ballot our members. That's, we keep our finger on the pulse that way. But, we've balloted our members on these, the tax abatement type of things, these tax incentives to bring in the large corporations to headquarter here. And a lot of times our members are split. And the reason why is because small business owners, they understand, look, if you bring in these bigger businesses, that's going to help. We're all working together here. It's a partnership. We could get some business from the people that are headquartering here, or, from the people that are moving in and whatever that may be. But these business owners, they want to work together with our government, and our government in Texas generally looks to the business owner for, their input, and not necessarily tries to tell the business owner what is best for them. And that's why it seems to work. We don't want to see that trending. We've seen where some lawmakers, especially on the local level, have tried to, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but have really tried to kind of overstep their bounds and try to get more into the regulatory process with small business owners. And we've seen the effect, and we're trying to reel that in right now as we're in our legislative session.
Yeah, that's right. It's right. I think we're about 80 days in, something like that, in our 140-day session here in Texas. That's every 2 years, right? So that's one of the things, maybe keep them away for a little while.
Yes.
This part-time legislature, which is kind of cool too, because a lot, the politicians, they also have to have a full-time job. They don't get paid a whole lot in Texas, about $7,200 a year while they're in session. So it's not a lot. You really got to have an extra job on the side, or a real job, which connects them with the private economy, keeps them going. And you mentioned about the property, tax abatements and how the small businesses are split, which is kind of interesting, right? We had what's called in Texas Chapter 313, which was for school districts. They could provide property tax abatements for a certain number of years and a certain amount for some businesses that would go there, and be for a number of businesses. Well, those expired in December of 2022. And so there's some discussion here in Texas about whether or not to bring it back, or some form of it to bring it back. A lot of those typically go to, in many cases, larger businesses, right? Mm-hmm. So you get some more of that competition that's in there. So it's interesting that you would say that the NFIB members would be split, because I think they do see some of that competition as maybe a good thing, but also you bring in competition where a lot of them don't get that same benefit. And so I wonder, kind of with your membership and with NFIB, Do y'all hope that something is brought back? Or are you waiting to see kind of the details of what that would look like with a property tax abatement or whatever other sort of incentive deal comes up?
Yeah, here's what I'll say. So let me give you an example. We had a member talk to us the other day about their inventory tax, quote unquote, burden. So in Texas, for your listeners, Texas is one of only 9 states that taxes a business owner's business personal property tax. And I like to explain that as if you were to take a building, their commercial property, and you were to dump it upside down, pretty much everything inside that building would be taxed, including things that depreciate like their furniture and their chairs, but then also these businesses that have items held for resale, like their heavy inventory, so on and so forth. And in a supply chain, high supply and supply chain issues, where a business is kind of holding that inventory because they don't know when that next supply chain will becoming next. They're sort of almost penalized from having extra inventory on with this tax. So I bring this up because the member not only has to pay on their commercial building personal property, their property tax on that, but then they're paying this business personal property tax. Now keep in mind that, headquarters, I don't know, call it Joe Corporate, has moved in next to her and has gotten this tax abatement. And so it's brought up the value of the properties in that sort of commercial space. So now her property tax values have gone up while Joe Corporate does not have to pay that. And so here's where the rubber meets the road. Like I said, our members are split, but here's what we say to the legislature. Sure, we want Texas to prosper, bring in these corporations. Our small business guys might be able to benefit from a relationship in that regard. But if we're going to do that and we're going to get these corporate tax abatements, then we need to do something for our small business owners. Let's give them some property tax relief. And so what does that look like? And that's what the legislature is looking at right now. I say quote unquote, because we've sort of labeled this business personal property tax the inventory tax, which is super burdensome in Texas. It's very regressive, and Texas is very great state to do business in. That's not one of the best things that we've done. And so we are really pushing for inventory tax relief. And I will tell you that both Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick at one point had mentioned that they wanted to increase the exemption for particularly our small business owners. So we're looking to see what's on the table right now. But yeah, with the tax abatement, when our members are sort of split on an issue, we try to potentially just kind of sit back and watch and say, we're not going to stand in the way. But look, let's try to help where we can these small business owners that may not be benefiting from the big guys coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, Annie. And I think you know where I am on this. Like eventually at the end of the day, I want to eliminate property taxes. I don't think it's a good form of taxation. It's a wealth tax. It's something that never allows us to own our property, whether you're an individual or a business or whomever, right? That employer can't own that property, even when they pay off the mortgage, or I can't own my house that I'm in right now if I pay off my property taxes. But until that day, I agree with you. I think we need to get rid of the business personal property tax entirely. It's a double taxation. There is Senate Bill 5 by Tan Parker here in Texas that's looking at raising that exemption from, I think, $2,500 to $25,000. I mean, I think that would be a good step in the right direction on that to really help out the businesses. And there's other bills too, House Bill 2, which is looked at in the House on compression, reducing the school district M&O property taxes by buying them down about 15 cents. I think that's a good way to go about it too, because that helps out businesses, individuals, and even renters at the end of the day, as those landlords can pass those savings on to them. I'm hopeful that we'll get more with the massive, another big part of small businesses and the growing economy is Texas has a almost $33 billion surplus from the current biennium that we're in now, 22-23, not including the additional revenue that's coming in 24-25. So there's about $60 billion floating around of where those dollars will go. And I'm hopeful, and it looks like the leadership and everything else really wants to get, a massive property tax relief bill passed. And I hope that's the case. I would always like to see more. I'd like to see around 20 billion. If you look at inflation adjusted dollars, going back to that 14 billion that was passed in 08, 09. But I think we're all going to benefit if we get some of that relief, including those small business owners. Have they also said that, they like or need that property tax relief, not just the business personal property, but just their overall property tax bills continue to ratchet up faster and faster?
Yeah, I mean, we still, because if you'll recall, when the legislature passed the cap on how much, their local governments could increase that property tax rate, not above that 3.5%, that only applied to residential. And so we have our small business owners, I'm not kidding you, that have said, hey, my property tax values have increased 200% over the previous year. But truly, yes. I mean, as homeowners, yes. And so when we get lawmakers that say, hey, your business owners would potentially benefit from the homestead tax exemptions and increases and whatnot. Okay, that's fine, but that's not what we're here to lobby. We're here to talk about this business personal property tax, because at the end of the day, when you drive around some of these mid-sized towns and really your urban cities too, you physically seeing these mom and pop shops with their doors shut and they've been emptied out. And the absolute number one reason is because they were forced out. They could not afford their property taxes. That is unacceptable. When these people have done everything they could to keep their doors open during a pandemic, to make sure they took out loans and grants to make sure that their people that they employed were still able to put food on the table. And yet they still had to close their doors because their property taxes were too high. That's completely unacceptable. And if we don't do something about it this session, then, we've got to answer some questions and I'm hopeful, right now, I think just like with any state and we've seen it at the federal level too, you've got the House and the Senate butting heads on whose idea is best, right? Like everybody wants to have the best idea, and it was mine. But we understand that there's going to be the people that are going to benefit from this, and maybe people that don't necessarily benefit from whatever that plan is. That's why we're trying to kind of scream it from the mountaintops that so goes the demise of our small business owners. Is that's really going to be the demise of our communities. And if people aren't employed, people can't own homes, people can't pay taxes, people can't put their kids in schools. So it's very cyclical.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great point. The other big tax, and then I want to get into some regulations next, because there's a good bill out there, but is the franchise tax, right? That's another one that we fought for a number of years of trying to eliminate. It's been reduced some. They've raised some of the amounts of how you have to pay it of $1 million. If you're below that, you don't have to pay it. But it's still a burdensome form of tax in Texas that very few other states have that I hope at some point will also go away. Are y'all pushing much on that as much lately, or is it more the focus of property taxes? Because that's really the talk of the town.
Right. So in that bill that you mentioned earlier, the SB 5, there's sort of a combo option there where a business owner could get sort of this reduction on their inventory tax at $25,000 plus potentially a 20% credit on their franchise tax. That would be the value of what their tangible personal property was. However, keep in mind, truly, about in Texas, because I've spoken with the comptroller's office recently, you're looking upward to about almost 90% of business owners that do not pay the franchise tax at this point. So really, kind of the quote unquote, the top 1%ers would really only kind of benefit from a franchise tax credit, because you've got so many that just don't even pay it. So to answer your question, the focus on the franchise tax relief really isn't there anymore as much as it had been in past years. And, our legislature was really good about increasing that franchise tax rate reduction up to 25% across the board for all businesses. There was a point in time when we had asked to repeal the franchise tax. We just see now that our true small business owners in the state are below the threshold to pay it, or they're exempt in some way, or have that, across the board deduction. So we don't see that being as burdensome as the property tax, to be frank.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't realize as many of them, didn't pay it, I guess, because that $1 million exemption port. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And businesses keep moving here, right? And because people talk about, well, they have the franchise tax and that reduces our rankings in some of the economic freedom or the state business tax climate rankings. Although Texas still is up there. I think we're at 14th now. I'm always like, why are we at 14th? This is the Tax Foundation's index that they have, but yet we're the place where all the businesses are moving.
I know.
This doesn't add up.
No.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of good reason to move to Texas and those things. And I know a lot of other states, like I'll do some work also with the Pelican Institute in Louisiana. And Louisiana is trying to figure out ways to be more like Texas, to find ways to reduce. There's a lot of state competition to where Texas can't just sit back on its laurels and think, you know what, we're Texas, people are going to move here. We've got to keep finding ways to reduce the regulatory and tax and still fund the essential services of government, right? Still have some form of regulation to where it's not just the Wild West. I'm a free market guy as much as possible, but I think that there are some roles for a little bit of regulation in the marketplace, okay? And this is kind of the next point that I wanted to talk about with you, Annie, was the Texas Regulatory Consistency Act. House Bill 2127. It's by Chairman Dustin Burrows out of Lubbock, back where my Texas Tech Red Raiders are. And yeah, and I think there's a lot of good with this bill that basically, from what I understand, and you probably have a better way of explaining it because you already have some great ways of explaining other things today. I really liked that part about turning the building over and everything, whatever falls out. That was a good one. But basically, the local governments can't have any regulations that exceed whatever the regulations are imposed by the state, right? So that kind of sets the ceiling. They can do some things underneath that, but that's really it. But what are kind of the benefits that you see, and how would you explain it?
Yeah. So again, this bill, it's the Texas Regulatory Consistency Act. And we've got also Chairman Brandon Creighton from Conroe is our champion on the Senate side. And, I'll tell you, he has helped us with a, similar form of legislation since the 2019 session. We tried to pass this, the 2021 session, we tried to pass this. And then Phil King, who's now in the Senate, was our champion on the House side last session. And it's just been one of those, it's, I guess, not the time and the place, and then just educating folks as to why this is needed. So just kind of the one or two line of it is this bill would restore regulatory powers that have always traditionally been encompassed within state and federal government back to the state and federal government. So you see, in Texas has general law cities and home rule cities, and we won't get into all of that. But look, Texas cities will still keep their local control powers over zoning, public safety, public health, overgrown lots, door-to-door sales, water restrictions, you name it. This bill will not strip cities of any of their governing powers over their communities. What we've seen in the last 5 years is a trend that is happening. And frankly, I don't think our Texas cities want this to happen, but they've been pressured. So we've seen these sort of out-of-state, more politically focused groups, generally being the national labor unions, to be very honest, that have come in and have pressured, starting at our urban cities like Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, and have pressured these cities to start stepping into the kind of the labor arena, regulating private employment practices, trying to regulate benefits, wages, scheduling. Just diving into a realm of jurisdiction that cities have never, ever played in. And to be really honest, cities do not have the resources or the time to even administer the things that they've attempted to pass and have passed. These things have always been done at the state level and the federal level because these things have statewide implications and implications over our major streams of commerce and in our businesses across the state and across the country. And so it just doesn't make sense for these local governments to try to regulate things that would really kind of change the look of our economy, we're the ninth largest, economy in the world, just behind Italy. And we've got, local city councils trying to decide what that's going to look like. It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. And the way I like to put it is that we have these blueberries in Texas and a sea of red.
Right.
You've got a lot of conservative areas across this great state of Texas, but you do have these areas, these pockets where, just call it out, progressives are coming out with a lot of regulatory costs. I mean, we were just talking about property taxes. Look, the Texas Constitution says that we are prohibited from having a state property tax. This is all local stuff that is ramming, businesses and individuals and employers with all those high property tax. And the same thing, like you're saying, Annie, with the regulations and the zoning, and it makes it to where it's tough to build. And I get your point, though. Like, look, these locals, they're all upset about things, kind of like they were with Senate Bill 2 a couple of years ago, with reining in the growth of their property taxes. It's like, look, state, y'all are coming after us. But we have to remember, and look, that government's best is closest to the people, right? I believe that. But the problem is that the government that's governing closest to the people in some places of Texas don't reflect all of Texas. And it's making it a burden on the rest of the state. Because if Austin is doing their progressive nonsense coming out of Austin, it's pushing them to where I live in Round Rock and other places, to where it's raising my taxes. It's raising my cost of doing business, just like other businesses that are out there. And so it's a huge cost. And so with this Texas Regulatory Consistency Act, how do you think businesses would be able to benefit from what's going on with this bill?
So, I mean, let me first preface by just saying, look, NFIB, we're not a partisan organization. And at the end of the day, taking even the policy away from it, it's the procedure. Okay. So these cities are passing these ordinances with no stakeholder input in a matter of, maybe a week, if that. In the middle of the night, they propose these ordinances. They have not thought through them. They've not thought through the cost to the business owners, to the implications of business owners doing business across county lines, not even just across the states, but county lines. And so they've not thought through these policies. They're not sound policies, whether we agree with them or not. And so that's why anything that has implications across county lines, across state lines, any of that needs to be discussed and vetted in a bicameral process, and in a process that's happening, like I said, at the state capitol, where we go through the committee process, through the House, through the Senate, stakeholder input. We're all testifying. You've got months and months to vet these things out. So just putting that sort of out there. And how businesses will benefit from this is it creates some sort of consistency in a world of very much uncertainty right now. Business owners, when we poll our members, they cite uncertainty over government action, uncertainty over government regulation, and uncertainty over economic conditions in their top 5 biggest problems and priorities. And what happens when a business owner, especially a small business owner, is uncertain about anything? They cannot invest back into their business. They cannot invest back into their employees in the forms of benefits and bonuses and wage increases. They can't hire more people. They're completely hamstrung by the uncertainty of what's going to happen next. And that's why statewide Texas has done so well, because there is some sort of certainty, the stability of what this state sort of looks like, and knowing that, our governor and the makeup of our state legislature, who, by the way, they're all elected. Okay. They look like they are pro-business. They're going to create sound policy, and that it is a process that we're all involved in, as opposed to these, local city councils that, like I said, are either pressured or have their own ideas about how this state should operate. And that's not the way the state constitution in Texas was ever set up. So I just think it's very disingenuous when the cities come in and they act like we're stripping all of their powers away. And, frankly, the state constitution right now says that if cities are doing anything that conflict or are inconsistent with our state constitution, that, it's against our state constitution right now, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So it just boggles my mind that they act like this legislation is just completely taking away their right to be a city in the state of Texas.
Yeah, that's right. And at the end of the day, I mean, the state was the one that created the local governments, right?
Yes.
And the states also created the federal government. And so we have to remember the system of federalism that we have, which has been beautiful. I mean, it's part of why I think America, Texas, has been so prosperous compared to many other places around the globe.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said earlier, Annie, which is right on, I mean, small businesses are the ones that are the lifeblood of the economy. They're the ones that are hiring so many people. I think you said 99.8% or something like that. Very high share of the people that are being employed. It's just really important that they have that consistency, because in economics, you're right on. That's what we talk about, is that we need certainty. It's one of the reasons why having limited government, having regulations that are consistent, lower taxes, no personal income tax in Texas is important too. But those are the things that really support more economic growth and prosperity. So that way individuals, families, employers all have the best opportunity to have success and to let people prosper, And so as we're wrapping up our time here, Annie, is there anything else that you'd like to add that we haven't talked about or maybe mention again?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would just say that this bill is important. And, some of the things that the, opponents might say is, well, what are all the things that the cities are passing that your businesses are wanting to scale back? It's not necessarily just about that. It's that we started to see a trend, and we know that this trend is not going away. So we're just reestablishing our jurisdictions. Okay. And so we're not taking away, as a matter of fact, in the bill, we explicitly say, cities, you're going to retain your traditional powers as a city. And I just want to make that clear. But we're giving small businesses a tool, if they need it, to fight back against some of these burdensome, ordinances that are being proposed, because right now they don't have a tool. They don't even know these ordinances are even proposed until they're passed, and they have to figure out how to comply with them. So that's just being number one. And then I would just reiterate that this property tax relief for our small business owners is critical. On top of that, we're looking at bills right now that would maybe offer some more options for our small employers to offer health insurance. That's another tool in the tool bag to be able to hire people. Cost of health insurance is, we're at a crisis right now as far as affordability for health insurance, and employers want to be able to take care of their employees, and they want to be able to offer that benefit. So at the state legislature in Texas right now, we're looking at some options that might be able to help with affordability and help with, flexibility and cost options in that regard. And, I'll tell you, just as somebody that, represents small business owners, to be honest, it's really just about kind of one less thing and trying to kill kind of all those bad bills out there that would just be kind of the nail in the coffin for these small business owners, to be really honest. We're trying to keep that boat steady, and just one little thing could tip that boat. And these small business owners that are still trying to recover from the pandemic. And let's be honest, we could be looking into the eyes of a recession right now. And so we're just asking our legislators on the state and federal level to keep that in mind. And, let's try to keep the boat from rocking.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the way you put that there. And well, thank you for everything that you do. Continue to keep up the good work. I hope this does work out this session with House Bill 2127 and some of the other property tax relief efforts that are out there. Hopefully, it'll make Texas even more prosperous and have more businesses. And so thank you for all you do. And God bless you and your family, Annie.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, and for the audience, please, if you like this show, please give us a 5-star rating. We're recording this on March 31st, 2023. So we have a lot more to talk about in the coming weeks. But until next time, let people prosper.